We have a quorum, so I think we'll get started here. So welcome everyone to the Lunch and Learn, and today's topic is grant writing. And we have John Christman, who is a professor in the Department of Internal Medicine and a intensive care specialist, and a very experienced writer of grants and grant reviewer, and for the NIH and other organizations. And he also is runs the CCTS's Launch to Success, our grant writing workshop, and the Launch to K grant writing workshop. So he's very committed to helping trainees and junior faculty succeed at grant writing. And so he's here to share his tips for success, maybe something about all his failures before he became a successful grant writer. He can tell you the road not to take and what to do to be successful. So I'll turn it over to you, John.
Yeah, okay. Well, it would be really great if I could get to know everybody a little bit and find out what your levels are. There's only 10 of us on, so I think there were 18 signed up, but since there's only 10 of us on, maybe we could, if it's all right, to have everybody sort of introduce themselves and maybe very, very, very briefly talk about their grant writing experience so far in small grants. I understand you're mostly graduate students and postdocs, and so many of you probably have submitted grants or small grants already, but it's very threatening to put in your first R01. I mean, you know, the fear of failure really is very compelling. I fully understand. So let me introduce myself first. So I'm John Christman. I have came to Ohio State in 2013 as the director of the critical care signature program. So all the ICU services. So I'm really not a clinical, I mean, I do clinical critical care, and I'm really good at it, and I've done it all for the last 43 years, but I'm really a basic scientist when it comes to research. And my lab has actually been funded since 1984, and I've been independently funded continuously since 1988. Never really a big lab, and but I have been pretty persistent, and have, you know, probably gotten somewhere between $25 and $30 million worth of grants over my career. And I'm still hoping to get one more grant. So that's what I'm working on right now. I would say that unlike many of you, I really sort of wandered into research. I kind of had an idea that I wanted to be a scientist when I was an internal medicine resident and a pulmonary fellow. And I just started doing that. And I've been very lucky in my career and worked with an awful lot of people. I trained at Indiana, IU. I went to IU Bloomington, then internal medicine training program in Indianapolis, and then pulmonary fellowship at the University of Vermont, and then a critical care fellowship at Pittsburgh, so all clinical type training. And then my first job was at the University of Vermont, where I was for 4 years. Then I moved to Vanderbilt, where I went through that, you know, associate professor routine for 16 years. And then the University of Illinois for 9 years. And then I've been here now almost 8 years. So that's pretty much my story. I've got 3 kids. My oldest son's and his wife are associate professors of geography in Philadelphia and are very academic. My son and his wife are doctors. Tyler's a pediatric orthopedic surgeon, and his wife is an obstetrician, gynecologist at Indiana University. And then my daughter is a government consultant and works for Deloitte and is working at the IRS right now and running 3 teams. So I have good kids and six grandchildren that are 4 to 10 years old. So who wants to go first? I would like everybody just to give a little bit of a background about grant writing experience and where you are in the process.
I can go ahead and start. Hi, right. I'm Dr. Kristen Fox. I am a postdoctoral scholar in internal medicine, division of gastroenterology, hepatology, and nutrition. And I study pancreatic cancer and cachexia, so the muscle wasting that goes along with pancreatic cancer. I have written this TL1 and been successful. Unsuccessful in a Pelotonia fellowship. And I basically transitioned my TL1, expanded it quite a bit, and helped my PI get an R21 based on the project with a score of the first percentile 10 for impact factor.
Wow.
Which was really exciting.
Yeah, it is.
And just helped her submit a R01 for the October deadline.
Oh, good. So you're getting experience by proxy, essentially. I mean, your assistant.
Oh, yeah.
I got it. Okay. Alison Anderson, do you want to go next? You're just,
sure.
You just happen to be on my, in my order here.
I'm a postdoc fellow at the College of Nursing in the T32 supplement looking at Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah.
And I haven't submitted any official grants before. I went to Vanderbilt and we did several mock grants during my PhD program.
Yeah.
But I did more of a secondary analysis, so I never actually had to get funding.
Yeah.
So I haven't submitted anything real yet.
Yeah. Well, Vanderbilt's mock program is really good. I mean, I was there for 16 years and I have a lot of friends and trainees there. So yeah, so that's okay. Eric Eisenmann.
Hi, my name is Eric. I'm a pharmacist. I came to OSU to do my PhD studies. I'm now an F31 fellow. I've submitted a couple F31 awards, an LRP award through the NIH, and a Pelotonia award. So some good experience. I also took the grant writing class through the College of Medicine, and I found that very helpful early in my studies.
Yeah, cool. And did you get the F32?
Yeah, so I'm a pre-doc, recently graduated, but a pre-doctoral graduate student. I got an F31, was successful in that, and I also received the Pelotonia Fellowship.
Oh yeah, great. And then Jerry Q.
Yeah, I'm an MD PhD student in my second year of the graduate school phase. I haven't written any actual grants, but wrote one for the grant writing class and one for my candidacy, and planning to submit an F30 in April.
I see. That sounds great. So you've got a long clinical road ahead of you too. Somehow my order changed, so maybe somebody could talk next. Victoria Dietrichs.
Hi, I'm a PhD student in speech and hearing science. I work with post-stroke aphasia. In a treatment study right now. I wrote part of an F31 for candidacy as like an exercise, and then used that to kind of shape into my TL1 application, which was successful. And yeah, probably will try to work on preparing an F32 that I might take with me to a postdoc position as I get ready to start applying. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, sounds great. Kristen Fox.
Hey there, I'm a TL1 postdoctoral fellow. My background is in clinical psychology, and I am in a lab over at Nationwide Children's and the Center for Biobehavioral Health. In terms of grant writing experience, I've submitted grants for additional postdoc funding, intramural research funding from NCH. I've assisted my mentor with R01 submission and resubmissions, and I'm currently preparing a K23 for February submission.
Great. That sounds really great. Kimberley Scott.
Hi there. Sorry, unmuting challenges. I am a physical therapist by training, and I am a predoctoral TL1 fellow currently. And so obviously submitted the TL1 for funding. And I also have a mentored award through the national professional body for physical therapy. So through the APTA, they have mentored awards through the Academy for Pediatrics. And so that has been extremely helpful in my dissertation work. I've been helping to edit a R01 submission for my primary advisor. So that's been really instructive for me to see the process and also participate in editing for a resubmission for rescoring. And I'm hopeful that sort of when I transition to the next step, which will likely be a faculty role, to pursue an application for a K award.
Yeah, great. Ruth Ackah.
Hi, I'm Ruth Ackah. I am a general surgery resident. So my background, I'm Texas born and raised. I went to University of Texas for undergraduate, did a biochemistry major, BS. And then I did my medical school training at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. And then I came to OSU for general surgery training. And then after my second year in general surgery, I went out into my professional development years to do mentored research. And during that time, I joined the lab of Dr. Vidhu Garg over at Nationwide Children's in the Center for Cardiovascular Research, looking at genetic contributions to congenital heart disease, and specifically at aneurysms associated with congenital heart disease, because I was interested in CT surgery. And during that time, that was in summer 2020, I applied for 4 grants after joining the lab, an NIH F32, the TL1, the AHA postdoc award, and then the LRP. And I was awarded 3 out of 4 of those. The only one that I was not successful with was the AHA award.
Yeah.
I was triaged.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so
Yeah.
I am currently an F32 fellow and also serving time on my LRP as well.
I see. And then Aaren Kettelhut.
Yeah, hi, my name's Aaren. So I am a pre-doc in the Biomedical Sciences graduate program. And I am also in the dual MD PhD program here. I'm a 4th year graduate student, but a 6th year overall. And I'm working in the lab of Dr. Nicholas Funderburg, and we look at the immunology of cardiovascular disease and HIV infection.
Wow, sounds cool.
Thanks. I've had some experience, not as much as some of my fellow individuals in here. I did write a practice grant during my master's in public health and epidemiology at the University of Cincinnati, and I did this in lieu of a thesis. I got to work one-on-one with a faculty member who taught grant writing. And then when I matriculated here, I also took the grant writing course offered through OSU COM. And then I also wrote my grant for my candidacy. And then I am one of the CCTS1 TL1 fellows. So I was successful in getting that one, but that's the only grant that I've submitted so far.
So sounds great. Ben Buck.
Yeah, sorry. I am a 3rd year cardiology fellow, and I'll be working in the T30 or participating in the T32 program in Dr. Fedorov's lab. Looking at the role of fibroblasts and some age and sex specific differences in their function and how they contribute to atrial fibrillation.
I see.
And after that, I'm planning on returning for a clinical EP fellowship and then splitting my time as a physician scientist. And sorry, I was actually a little late to the meeting, so I'm not sure if I answered everything that you asked.
Yeah, no, great. Nargis Yureva.
Hi, my name is Nargis Jurayeva.
Yeah, I wasn't too far off.
Yes, the DZ makes that difficulty.
Yeah.
So I'm a program manager with DMRC, and I work with Dr. Choi. So I mainly help her with grant submissions, and that's the reason I'm kind of joining this meeting and learning as much as I can.
I see. Okay, so you know, we really have learned a lot now about each other, and one thing that's really important is to put in professional society grants. Small grants are highly predictive of academic success. So you don't need to have different grants in each one. You just put the same one in, you know, get it better each time. You get some feedback and you improve it. I think most people have to put in about 6 grants before they start being successful. We all know of people that sort of got a big grant on the first submission, but at least I've never been one of those people, and I haven't worked with really very many people that were able to actually do that. Another thing that came out is the loan repayment. You really need to know that the NIH has a wonderful loan repayment program. And if you do have a debt from medical school or your training, that will give you up to $35,000 per year. And I think that's really important to do. I heard a lot of you talking about putting in F-32s. This is really, really good. I'm currently, for the last couple of years and for the near future, I'm on the NITM study section, which is the NIH institutional training mechanism. And it's the study section for heart, lung, and blood that looks at all of the T-32 grants. And they're pretty big grants to go over, 300 pages. There's, you know, there's a lot going there, but most of these grants encourage even those that are funded on a T-32 to actually put in an F-32, because it's really a nice grant. You get a review, and that review is often helpful for putting in another grant. Plus, it's great for the T-32 because instead of funding you with T-32 money for 2 or 3 years, they can fund somebody else because you have an F-32, which is, I think, a little more prestigious because it's an individual grant between you and your mentor. So those are really important things for grant writing. So by putting it in, you know, in my field, it would be to the American Lung Association, a Parker B. Francis Fellowship, American Thoracic Society, and the American Heart Association actually funds quite a lot of lung diseases. They have 2 study sections called Lung 1 and Lung 2, and I've sat on those as well. So I think that's a very important thing to do. I think it's a good idea. Several of you talked about helping your PI write grants. Obviously, you're providing supportive data for the grant. I mean, that would be how you would fund, because you're funded by their programs. But it's also good to, you know, have a focus that's your own focus, that's maybe not completely different than your mentor, but is at least complementary so that it's not conflicting, because you're going to need to put in your own grants as well. I think. So we can do this in a lot of different ways, but let me go over, because I every time I give a talk about grant writing or at one of the Launch to Success sessions, I like to see what's out there and what other people think. And there's a lot of good information about grant writing that's on the NIH websites, but also at most of the research programs will have some way of doing it, because everybody wants you to be successful as an early stage investigator. So you right now, everybody has got a T1 or a F-32 or a grant that supports, that's a mentored grant that supports your further education as a researcher. And that's really important. At some point in time, though, in order to transition to a tenure track position, you're going to have some independent funding. A K award is really the next step. So the NIH, like the most successful pathway, is the T to K to R. So a K is a mentored grant. There's also the K99 ROO, which is a 5-year career development grant that transitions from a mentored grant to an independent grant in that 5 years. But most people get K08s or K23s, or there's K01s. There's a whole series of K grants, and every institute uses them a little differently than others. So a K is a really important thing. So how do you get it is one of the important things. And I think it's important to remember how they're reviewed. That's kind of an important thing. So I think everybody focuses in on supportive data and a plan and a research plan, and that sort of takes precedence. But actually the 5 criterion for a K award are the candidate. So you want to make sure that you're a good candidate, and that's where these small grants and publications come in. So right now it's a good idea to get small grants and to have publications, and they don't all have to be in science. If you get one in science, that's going to be a good thing, or Nature Immunity or one of the other big journals that's high impact. But it is important for you to develop a publication record, and whether that's in a journal that's got an impact factor of 4, or an impact factor of 7, or an impact factor of 20. It still is important to have some body of work that represents your talents. The 5 criterion really are the candidate, and I just went over that, the environment and the institutional support. So the environment, they want to know that you're in a good scientific environment, that you've got a network of people, and it's important to develop that network of collaborators in order to do it. Nobody ever puts a grant in and there's only one PI and no co-PIs. That wouldn't be a good idea. You want to have a strong network of individuals that have complementary but not overlapping skills. It's very difficult when you're working with a PI, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're competing with your PI for a grant, and you don't really want you want to have a grant that you're putting in that represents independence from your grant, from your mentor as well. And that's easy to do if you go to a different institution. But if you're at the same institution, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to do. It is important to have involvement of that mentor in your R01 or whatever you're actually putting in, but you don't want to make it look like it's a duplication of that person's work. Then the mentor is the next thing for a K, and that's a very important thing. So you want a mentor that's well-funded, that's got resources to help you advance your career, that's very strong in the field, and has a good NIH funding history. That really helps. If you have a mentor that doesn't have those things, then you have to start thinking about a mentorship committee and make sure you get senior people as mentors for a K award. Then the most important thing is the training plan. So they want to make sure that you're augmenting your skills to do something that you're not already trained into doing. And that's really important. And all of us can use training. So it doesn't matter where you are in how much you've had in the past, a little bit more or something focused into something is really important. For instance, nowadays, it's very important for you to have skills in informatics. Now, you don't necessarily need to be able to do that yourself because you're going to work with an informatician, but it is important for you to have a basic understanding of how to do that work. And so having advanced training in large databases and things like that is important depending on your field. And then the last thing is the approach. And that's where your specific aims and your plan and everything. And that should be well integrated with the training plan. So if you have a project and say you're going to learn to do single cell RNA, and that's going to be an important thing to do, which maybe it is, maybe it's not, then you need to make sure you're getting advanced skills in that at the same time. So those are the 5 criterion for a K award. The other thing, and before I stop talking and get more questions, I wanted to kind of go through something else I found, which I thought was pretty good. It was, I got this off the internet. It's from the Society of Clinical Psychology, and they talk about the 10 tips for a successful academic career. And this really does relate to me. So number 1 was to carve out research time and treat it like any other appointment you wouldn't cancel. And I've said for years, it's really important for you to do something for your career every day. That's kind of important for you. And it's very easy to get distracted in academic medicine, specifically clinical medicine. There's always something to do or more things you can do, but you really do need to protect that time, and you need to really think about it thoughtfully and in order to come up with something that's innovative and significant. So it needs to always be innovative and significant. Also, don't ever forget that it's the National Institute of Human Health and not the National Institute of Mouse Health. So you need to always think about how it'll impact human health. The second thing is knowing when to say yes and knowing when to say no. And this really takes some dancing, I think. So, you know, just to use an example, they're in biomedical research, there are fewer women than men. So women sometimes get saddled with a lot of committees and things like that really don't advance their career quite as much as it should. And you have to be very careful about that. Same thing with underrepresented minorities, African Americans, Hispanic, Native Americans, and Pacific Islanders. You know, they're going to be on every search committee and things like that, and can be overwhelmed with that, and it can take away from your research time. So you have to know when to say yes, something's going to advance your career, and when to say no. And you can't say no all the time, and you can't say yes all the time. So you have to really think a little bit about that. Flexibility. My version of that is you have to be an opportunist and take opportunities that are there. So the example I like to use is I had a medical resident that wanted to work with me on endothelial cells and pulmonary hypertension. Well, it's not my field, and I kept telling him this, and he wanted to do this anyway. And you know, I know how to culture endothelial cells and stuff like that. So he did a project, and you know, ultimately he didn't really get a lot out of it. It took time to get it up and going, and you know, it just didn't work out well for him. And he did a fellowship at a wonderful place in pulmonary, but ended up in private practice. Another person came to me and he said, you know, I don't know much about this. What would be a good project that would help your lab and also help me learn about the system? And he read about it for a week or two beforehand, rather than just showing up at the last, you know, on the first day without anything in his hands and head. And he did a great job. He contributed to our lab. He got a couple of publications out of it. And he did a fellowship and actually made it in academics. And and did very, very well there. So the difference is an opportunist, somebody that looked and tried to take advantage of what was there rather than trying to forge it into what they wanted to do. Now, it is important to morph whatever you're doing into something you're passionate about, but sometimes the beginning of it is a little different than what you expected. I would say if you are a clinical researcher and have clinical skills, and it is very important for you to integrate your research program with the patients you see. And there's lots of examples of that. In my field, I'm interested in acute lung injury, like in COVID ARDS. And so I've done quite a few studies where I've looked at macrophages from patients that actually had asthma or ARDS and studied how their phenotype has changed. So I'm using human material. Now, I haven't done that quite as much as I would have liked to have done in my career, but I did take advantage of all the opportunities that I had. Another thing is criticism. It's really important to get intramural reviews of your grants and your grant writing and get suggestions. So my example, and I won't use names this time, but I had a division chief at Vanderbilt, and he would read my grants and he'd write at the top, "Really good, John, can I use figure 3 in my grant?" or something like that. But he never really gave me any critical information back. Another one of the faculty, Bo Scheller, who actually was a Oxford scholar with Bill Clinton and is very smart, he would look at my grants and just tear them apart and make me feel so bad that I had written such a bad grant. But his comments and responding to his comments really were very helpful at improving my grant. So you want people to give criticism, constructive criticism, not destructive criticism. And Bo is really good at that. They talk about building relationships. And I've already talked about, you want to have a mentorship team for your K Award. You want to have collaborators that have complementary skills that can teach you something that you don't know for your K Award. For your R01, you want people that fill in gaps that you have scientifically. And this really requires a relationship with your mentor. So I have a lot of mentees. 3 of them actually are section chiefs for pulmonary at Vanderbilt, Nebraska, University of Florida. And I still communicate with them. I may have gotten more out of that, mentee-mentor relationship than they did, but I still interact with them now, even decades after they were with me in my lab. And, my current mentee, John Whistler, who's a trauma critical care surgeon, we meet almost every week. It's more than just the science. We've become friends, and I think you realize that, it's more than just the science. Life sometimes gets in the way of writing grants. We all have complicated family life in some cases, and things happen, and COVID and lots of different things. And getting through that really does require somebody that can support your career. Also, someone that can introduce you to a network and can help advance your career is really an important thing. And then the last thing that is in this list is have a clear idea of where you're going. I met with a junior faculty member actually this morning, who I think is very, very talented. She's new here, and her division chief asked if I could help mentor her. And she's just got too many things going on. I'll just say that, she's trying to get 3 different R01s submitted. That's too much. Getting one good one in is probably better than putting 3 that could be better. You do need to focus in on what you're doing and then just continue to make it better until they're begging you to do that work and want to give you a whole wheelbarrow full of money to do it. So I think right now the most efficient thing to do in our last 20 minutes is to take questions and find out what you want to know or what the questions are. I've already gone over the criterion for reviewing a K award and some of the backdrop things, but what questions do you have, or what problems have you had that you need help solving?
You can unmute and ask, or if you'd rather put it in the chat, do that. But
yeah, you can
please
do it
ask
that
away.
Yeah, you can do it that way. Either way, but I want to make sure, and don't be shy. I mean, if it was easy to do, everybody'd be doing it. It's tough to, go from being a very early trainee to being a junior faculty to being a senior independent researcher. Dumb luck actually helps with that. It helped, at least dumb luck was very good at helping me. So.
I had a question.
Dr.
Oh, you can go.
This probably is quick. Dr. Chrisman, so as far as the timeline for a K award, because for me, that would be the next step similarly, is it best to work, because you mentioned that the K award, you need to demonstrate that you are getting sort of additional knowledge and
for the training program.
Exactly. So is that something that's feasible to be writing like in fellowship, or is that something you need to sort of establish yourself as a junior faculty in a department and then kind of know what potential collaborators, et cetera, you might have in order to be able to best sort of speak to, okay, this is the skill set I'm going to gain from working with these particular faculty members at my institution, et cetera? Or is that something that you can sort of begin preparing even in fellowship?
Yes. The answer is yes. So, a lot depends on the culture where you are. I mean, at least the pulmonary culture is you do a 3-year fellowship and then you come on the faculty and then you figure out what you want to do with your rest of your life. And most of the faculty in pulmonary are actually non-tenure track, clinical track people that are different. But in other institutions, it's different. Both at the University of Illinois and at Vanderbilt, most of the people we hired on the faculty had already had advanced research training through an F32 or a T32 or the equivalent of that. And often the fellowships were a little bit more prolonged. So pulmonary and critical care in general takes 3 years, but often the fellows were 4 years or 5 years because protected time where you're learning how to do research and you sort of start adding to publications and experience and build a network is really important, I think. But if you can actually submit a K award during that, it's a big advantage. So one of my trainees that has already gotten his R01 and is up to be promoted this year, Josh Engler, he he broke away in medical school and did a year of research with a real famous critical care investigator. He did an extended fellowship of an extra year or so. And by the time he got here, he'd gotten a K award and we were his first faculty job. And, he's done really well, but he already had created a relationship with his previous institution that has fed additional publications. He was knowledgeable and savvy enough to develop the networks he needed to go forward. And he took it all advantage of the protected time that a K award presents. I think that's much more successful than taking a job, getting busy as a faculty member, either teaching if you're a PhD or clinical work if you're an MD, than it is. It's very difficult at that point in time to get the support, the institutional support and the protected time that's sufficient to develop as a scientist. Does that kind of answer your question? Also, the other thing I wanted to mention about K awards is if you put it in when you're more junior, less is expected than if you put it in after, say, your 5th year of faculty time. More is expected the more senior you are in the system. And I like the idea of, let's say in pulmonary and critical care, doing a 4-year fellowship instead of a 3-year, mostly clinical fellowship, having that extra time to get some publications of the work you've done and to relax and put in your K award. Then get your K award where you're doing your fellowship. And then if you decide to leave, you know, moving from one institution to another with a K award is actually a really, really good thing for the institution that you land at. Does that answer the question, or do you have any follow-up on that you want to, that I can address?
No, that was perfect. That was perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Earlier
is better.
Hey, yeah, so I had a question, and I suppose this really depends on the individual and the program, kind of on the other end of what Ruth had mentioned. Basically, what are some critical differences between a training plan you'd find in a graduate student level F award versus a K award? I found the F award very easy to write because you have classes and such. The K award seems a little more difficult. Could you speak on that a little bit?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm reviewing these T32s right now, and it's exactly a T32 and an F32 are the same. One's institutional, one's individual, but they're both pretty much the same in terms of the training plan. The training plan on a K is a 5-year plan that you're writing, 1, and 2, you're carrying into that a higher skill set, but it's exactly the same. There's didactics and coursework if that's required. There's meetings and workshops, like say a Bar Harbor workshop or a small conference that you're going to go to, or extra training in some specific thing. And then there's grant writing, there's mentorship training. There's a lot of things that we would all would improve our ability as an academician if we had. So the answer is that it's exactly the same. It's just more of it and more in depth, and it needs to be tailored to the individual needs of the candidate. That's really important. So you can't just take a training plan that worked for Ruth and put it in, and Kristen put it in, or Ben put it in, or Victoria put it in, or Jerry put it in. It really does need to be tailored to the project, tailored to the individual, and it needs to meet gaps in their training. And that often is coursework. For instance, it's best not to do a master's of clinical research as a fellow. It's better to begin that and then propose that in your K award, your K23 award, if that makes sense to everybody. So you don't want to get too much training beforehand if you've got to write a grant that involves a training program. For instance, the reviewers might just say, well, geez, you're so far advanced, you better just write a R01, and you don't want them to say that. So it needs to be substantive. And it's easy to do, but it does take some thought, and it is important. The reviewers look at that really important, because what we're trying to do is generate the next generation of biomedical scientists. That's the goal, generate the next generation of biomedical scientists. Okay, does that make sense, Eric?
Yeah, perfect, thank you.
Yeah, all right, we need questions from everybody. I have this thing, everybody should ask a question. Go ahead, Alison. Okay, is there, let's see, is that in the chat then?
Yeah, here's one.
Okay.
Any tips on how to diplomatically navigate moving a K or R to another institution if that's needed?
Well, the tips is for K, you got to find a mentor. You know, for instance, when Josh Englert came here, that was really important to find a mentor who could mentor the project. So that's an important thing, because remember, that's one of the main criterion. So his mentor actually contacted me and said, you know, this is a great person, and you know, the institution he was at was a place that everybody wants to be from, but nobody wants to be at. It was actually at Harvard, and you know, I was really happy to have him come, and I was, you know, very, very willing to be his primary mentor. So that's a good thing. Lorraine Ware, who is a phenomenal researcher in critical care medicine, she got her K award at San Francisco and then went to San Diego, and things didn't work out so well there in San Diego, mostly for her husband, not for her. But she moved to Vanderbilt, and it was like a match made in heaven. You know, she just has thrived there. She's got, I don't know, 400 publications now, I bet. So there's an example of people. So you've got to find a place that you fit in, that you want to be at, and it has the infrastructure to support your career. So that's a good thing. I think for institutions, it's better to build a K awardee all from the beginning, I call it building a K awardee, than it is to try to, you know, lure them from elsewhere. But there are people that want to lure. So I use the example of Harvard. Harvard's a pretty tough place, and there isn't much room for, you know, tenure-track faculty. So it was a great opportunity for Josh to leave there and come to Ohio State. And it was also closer to his family and things like that. So there's a lot of reasons to move, but you have to engage the mentorship team. Okay, are there other questions? Okay. How about you, Kristen, or Victoria, or anyone? Any questions? Fine.
Here's one in the chat from Kimberly. Is there a track record of more success for K awards to faculty at public versus private institutions?
I don't know the answer to that, but I think it depends on the institution. A lot of the K awards depend on how many T32s there are. T32s are institutional training grants, and we don't have that many of them here at Ohio State compared to Pittsburgh. I know this because I just know it. I won't tell you how I know it. But Pittsburgh has 32 T32s. We have probably a dozen, would you say, Stuart?
Yeah.
Vanderbilt has a lot. At the University of Illinois, we had 2 pulmonary T32s in the pulmonary and pharmacology division that just focused on lung. We had 2 cardiovascular ones, one in physiology and one in the cardiology division. We had 2 in GI, one in microbiology and one in the GI service. So there was a pairing of clinical and basic science division, and that works really well at the University of Illinois. I'll just tell you that. Vanderbilt has 3 T32s in the pulmonary division now. They have a clinical translational research T32 that Lorraine Ware leads. They have a basic science one that Tim Blackwell leads, and they have a one that came from another very senior person in microbiology that joined the pulmonary division and brought his T32, and that one includes undergraduates and graduates. I know Pittsburgh has a really good program in sleep medicine that's very multidisciplinary and crosses many, many departments, psychiatry, for instance, and things that maybe wouldn't be at other places. So the more T32s there are, the more Ks there are, is the bottom line there. Okay.
John, what was maybe the dumbest mistake you ever made writing grants?
Well, he kind of knows this because sometimes I talk about this. So I made every mistake there is in the everywhere. But the first grant that I ever wrote, first of all, my mentor never had time to really look at it. And I sort of came up with the idea myself. I didn't really read or know how to do it very well. And I didn't really read the instructions. The grant office was helping me, but they don't really do it at that same level. So one of the things I did, I made it too long. It was written in a concise way, but in order to get it to fit in the page, I actually just shrunk the font. Now, it is important to follow format. So in an NIH grant, you've got a half centimeter on a ½ inch on either side and on the top and the bottom. And if you exceed that, it will be rejected. Also, you have to use 11 Arial font, and that's really important. There are other fonts you can use, but 11 Arial is the one most people use. And if you use a different font that's too hard to read, they'll reject the grant. And then, of course, the size is 11, and if you exceed that. And people also talk about white space and things like that on it. And you have to be able to read all of the figures and stuff like that. So those are kind of some of the mistakes that I made on the first grant. The other thing was I didn't know you had to write a budget. I thought you got a grant and they just gave you whatever amount of money the grant was for, and I didn't realize you had to justify your budget, so I didn't put that in. And then I tried to do it after fact, but they said it was too late because the deadline had already gone over. And at the end, this was back before they triaged grants, so I didn't get a triage. I actually got it scored, and the score was the 99.9th percentile, which means that out of 1,000 grants, mine was the worst one. So that was kind of a wake-up call for me. And I really tried to figure out how am I going to get better at this. And so I started doing some of these short-term grant writing courses. And I think I did 6 of them. But they weren't very helpful because there was a lot of repetition in them. And, they were only like an afternoon or a one-day event. And that's one of the reasons why I felt really good at helping with this Launch to Success, because our program is both for the Launch to K and for the Launch to Success, which is the K to Writing, is a 26-week program. We meet 13 or 14 times. Stuart is actually the administrative officer for it. He's essentially the SRO. And, we really spend a lot of time going over this. And I think it's very effective because there's a lot of feedback by myself, the other 2 senior faculty members that are there. And the peer-to-peer interaction is really remarkable. And when you have to teach somebody or tell somebody why their grant needs to be improved, you learn a lot about your grant that you may have missed. So I think, you know, that was my first grant. I didn't get it. But I learned a lot in the process. And obviously it's something that you either get good at or you move on to something else. Sorry about my tickle there. Yeah. All right, we have just a few more minutes, and I know some of you haven't had a chance to write a question yet. So any other final questions?
Do you have thoughts on how large a K mentorship team should be, or if there's such a thing as too many mentors?
There probably is such a thing as too many mentors, but it is important to have a mentorship team. I think the days of having one mentor is long gone, because no one person can provide you with everything that you need. I think people kind of think about different kinds of mentors too. You can have a scientific mentor, and you can have a academic mentor who's teaching you how to advance in academics. I think it's important that you have someone that you admire. I usually recommend that you have a mentor that's someone like you in some ways. Like if you're a woman, I think it's nice to have a successful woman to be on your mentorship team, if not your primary mentor. I think if you're African American, it's really good to have somebody that's involved in that and has a similar pathway as you have, and that sort of thing. So, and then in terms of science, though, it's important for you to have a mentorship team that fills in all of the gaps in there. So I think 4 or 5 people is a pretty good number. No, you have to have a primary mentor. The primary mentor is overall responsible for your mentorship. But what if that primary mentor decides to take a job in Houston and leaves? Are you going to go with them? And in some cases, graduate students do that, but it's pretty disruptive to follow someone, and it may not turn out so well for you there. So it's nice to have 2 mentors that somebody could take over that mentorship team. So John Whistler, again, his mentor was Shandon Sen. Shandon left and went to Indiana. And that I had been part of his mentorship team, but I assumed the primary role. But he still interacts with Shandon. Shandon has been very helpful from afar. So I think the mentorship team is the most important thing for advancing somebody's career. It's impossible to do it by yourself. I hesitate to mention this, but you can pick a bad mentor. And my first mentor was not benevolent. He really did look out for himself, and many times that appeared to be at my expense. So I left that institution and went to Vanderbilt. And there I had the most wonderful mentor, and in fact, a team of mentors. I had a guy named Jeff Davidson, who's a wound healer, who's incredibly smart and very helpful. I have recently, he's retired now, but still active in the lab because he has an R01. And I had recent communication with him. Jean Rinaldo, a woman that I worked with during my fellowship in Pittsburgh, had moved to Vanderbilt, and I worked with her and another woman named Jenny Shepard, and they were phenomenal scientists and very strong mentors for me. And I had many other people that have provided me, mentorship over the years, including my own mentors, my own mentees that taught me a lot about not only myself, but about science and other things. So almost whatever level you're at, it's important to have mentors. One of my mentees, who's a lung cancer specialist, called me up. We hadn't worked together in 15 years, and he was having a real life decision about taking a job in California. And, it was really, I think I was helpful to him. And I was, really honored that he remembered me and asked me about it in the first place. Okay, we're about the end of time. I'm certainly willing to talk more and maybe talk again if it would be helpful. Or if anybody has any specific questions, I'm easily contacted through my email. So,
thank you so much, John, for coming to talk to us. And thank you, everyone, for your attention. And look forward to seeing you at the next Lunch and Learn in the new year.
All right, sounds wonderful. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.